Welcome. My name is Glenn Drover, and this is a short presentation on Australian inverter requirements. Australia is going through an energy transition which will replace most of its traditional rotating generators with solar, wind and battery power that will be connected to the grid via electronic power inverters. Up to 120 gigawatt of inverters may be required by 2042, with a capital cost currently estimated around 12 billion US. The inverters will be a mix of very large multi-megawatt connected to the high voltage grid and many smaller lower voltage connected inverter systems. The Australian grid operator AEMO and rule maker AEMC have established working groups to ensure that these inverters will contribute to the lowest cost transition of our energy system. By 2040, these inverters may regularly be delivering almost 100% of Australia's electricity. And so to maintain energy security and reliability, they will need to be smart devices. Over the last few years, AEMO and AEMC have been working together to look at the requirements to ensure that these inverters help to become part of the lowest cost transition of our energy system. This work continues with ongoing work on distributed energy requirements as well, and will continue for some years. As I said, Australia is going through a more than $200 billion 20-year energy transition, which is going to replace most of our traditional rotating generators with solar, wind and battery power that will be connected to the grid via electronic power inverters. Again, as I said, this could be around 120 gigawatts worth, with a cost of around about 12 billion US. The 120 gigawatts of inverters could include 50 or 60 gigawatts each of distributed energy resources used behind the meter, so generally on solar and batteries, and sometimes in front of the meter for community batteries. It's not clear yet how big the market area for these community batteries will be. And then approximately 60 gigawatts of it will be the larger multi-megawatt grid-scale inverters used for grid-scale solar, wind and battery projects. The grid connections even for the large-scale generation would be at the transmission grid above 66,000 volts. We have existing solar and wind connected at both 220,000 volts and 500,000 volts, but many systems are connected also to the distribution grid between 22,000 volts and 66,000 volts. This is a graphic from the AEMO integrated system plan, and this is from their step change scenario, which is the path that we appear to be on at the moment with the significant growth in both solar and wind generation. If we move just straight to the right-hand end of this chart, we get to a point in around about 2040 where we have almost 140 gigawatts of generation in the system. And as you'll see by these colours here, the top lighter yellow colour is the distributed energy, the distributed PV in the grid, and then underneath the grid scale connected solar power stations, and underneath that the grid scale connected wind power stations. But if we come below this purple line to the blue area, the light blue area, and as well as the purple area that's partly hidden behind this red line, these are behind the meter and dispatchable storage. The dispatchable storage may be made up of a mixture of pumped hydro and batteries as well. But you can see from the size of this the bar on the chart that this is where we get the estimate of around about 120 gigawatts of inverters may be required by 2042. So as the grid moves to this 96% renewable scenario by 2042, inverters may be regularly delivering almost or perhaps even 100% of Australia's electricity. So to maintain energy security and reliability, the devices will need to be smart and need to be providing grid support and stability services. So 4 of the services that are being discussed a lot at the moment are listed here. Grid forming setting frequency, so the ability of these inverters to form and hold the 50 hertz, 50 cycles frequency of the grid. And we've seen a few large-scale battery inverters with grid forming capabilities installed in the last few years here in Australia. The second one is our regular frequency control ancillary services. There are currently 8 services. 2 of them are the regulation frequency control, which is the raise and lower commands sent to the traditional rotating generators and some of the new batteries. And then we have 6 response frequency control services, raise and lower, for 6 second, 60 second, and 6 minutes. And again, this is where inverters will be able to provide a significant amount of these services as we go forward. The third one, inertia, is one of the new areas. It's not yet a paid service, but there are a number of trials being conducted to demonstrate what the inverter systems can do in terms of providing rapid inertia into the grid when required. And so this is a service measured in megawatts per second or megawatts per minute as a raise or lower into the grid. And then the last one, which is particularly important at the moment, the fault current, is the ability of the inverters to do 2 things. One is to stay connected to the grid when there is a disturbance on the grid. And so voltage may be significantly impacted, voltage and frequency, but also the ability to provide current into that fault to help clear faults that occur on the grid. And so this has been subject of some changes recently. So to provide all of these services and maintain energy security and reliability are the reasons that AEMO, the grid operator, is setting these conditions on inverters. So there's 2 effective sets of standards, one for the larger scale grid inverters, grid connected, and one for the smaller scale or the distributed energy resources inverters. Starting first with the grid scale inverters, the larger ones, they're picked up as part of the generator standards. So when a new renewable energy generator wants to build and connect a wind or solar farm or a very large grid scale battery, they have to confirm to the AEMO that all of the requirements will be met. And so I'll put down here 2 of the relevant documents, the web links to them. And by going to those web links, you can follow through all of the particular standards and requirements that AEMO seeks and seeks confirmation of for a connection of these. And then moving to the smaller DER scale inverters. So we have 3 million of these in Australia at the moment. So Australia has been one of the most successful places in the world for household and office solar energy systems. And so as we approach the 10 gigawatt mark and 3 million systems in Australia, and before that, the grid operator realised that these needed to be able to be controlled in some way. So where we've got to, up until recently, effectively these 3 million inverters are all operating independently, autonomously on their own. And when they represent in the order of this 10 gigawatts, that is the requirement then for the grid operator to start to be able to get control of them. And this will also include an ability for dynamic export limiting. So unfortunately, many areas of our grid now have reached a saturation point for solar PV. And so when new connections come along for offices and houses, they unfortunately are required to set a 0 export limit on their inverters. That doesn't make sense, to have built the resource and then not to be able to use it any of the time as an export. So the idea of a series of trials at the moment on dynamic export limiting is for the grid operator to be able to wind up and wind down the amount and number of inverters that are limited on their export to the grid. And so hopefully in the future, we'll have dynamic export limiting rather than hard export limits, and that will maximise the output we get from these resources. So the detailed requirements for these DER scale inverters are in the Australian standard, AS 4777.2. Unfortunately, it's not a public document. You do need to purchase it for about $275 from the standard store. I've listed here in conclusion a series of links with AEMO and AEMC that explain in more detail all of the activities they're undertaking and the consultations and the processes they're going through. So this provides an overview then of all the work that's underway and the work that's leading to the changes in the future. I hope you found that of some interest, and if there's any questions, you're welcome to contact me. Thank you.